Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America together. Now, here's Jeff.
33 minutes past the hour. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into. Coming to you live, of course, from the South Coast here in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's been hovering in the 30s this week, of course, here. Nothing like our friends in Wisconsin. But it's actually snowing in Seattle. Oh, my word. What is going on here? My word. Well, it's nobody's better to talk to in the 206. That's the area code around Seattle. That means that it's time for the MTC report, and it's time to talk to Mark Taylor-Canfield. Happy snow, Mr. Canfield. How are you, sir? Oh, yeah.
We're doing okay, Jeff. It is cold, though. It's the first time, I think, that the weather finally kind of got into my bones and made me say, you know what, not only am I not going out on the boat today, I'm probably just going to go home and get warm.
Good idea.
We're thinking about Eddie Van Halen and his song Eruption on the Van Halen's first album. So I came up with my own thing called Eclipse, which is kind of a big rock and roll solo guitar thing. And so I've been working on that, having a pretty good time, and at the same time, trying to deal with this weather change. It's been, apparently we have more snow coming tonight, and this is very, very rare in Seattle, folks. Believe me, it's very, very rare for Seattle to get snow at all, especially down here in the lowlands near Elliott Bay and Puget Sound, because we're pretty close to sea level here. And normally what happens is it snows, and it lasts for about 20 minutes, and then it rains and then melts away. But this time, it actually made it through the night. It's still out there, and we're expecting a lot more tonight. And then so, because nobody has snow tires here, and nobody knows how to drive in the snow, it becomes a total fiasco, and you get the slow motion car crashes as people slide down Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I was going to say Capitol Hill, and even some of the areas there near the fish market. I remember staying at a hotels, and I'm like, hey, my God, if it snows here, it can have some interesting car crashes. I mean, obviously, no one has anybody get hurt.
Yeah. It's just nobody knows how to drive in the snow here because it's so rare. So everything shuts down. It kind of becomes a big party. Because nobody goes to work, people drink a little bit, maybe, smoke some of that cannabis, which everybody loves around here so much, and just goes out and plays in the snow for a while. It's a good excuse to be a kid again and just sort of play around. This isn't Boston, where we're used to 20 below or whatever. This is Seattle, where at 50 degrees is the normal temperature all year round, whether it's spring, summer, winter, or fall. And so people are they're afraid of snow. A lot of people around here, we call it the S word. You're not supposed to mention it in conversation because apparently that makes it more likely to happen. Because once it does, everything closes down and nobody gets anywhere. We also have a lot of hills here, which I've talked about before, and that makes it almost impossible to navigate when it's icy out. So the winter wonderland, when our white Christmas came late, I guess, Jeff, because I was out on the boat on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, so it wasn't very cold back then. Now February suddenly has gotten down into the 30s at least, so that's cold for Seattle.
No doubt. Talking to the great MTC, I want to get into the Hall of Fame inductions of the great Foo Fighters and of course, the great former Nirvana drummer, connection to Seattle as well, and Dave Grohl and Tina Turner. I think I said Nina Turner in the text to you, but of course, hopefully the next representative from the great city of Cleveland, Ohio. But there's unfortunately some serious news with your sheriff. Phil is in on this. Police, which took a real beating, and of course Republicans don't want to talk about that, on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., in this January 6th sedition attack on the Capitol. There, once again, sheriffs and police, in this case Seattle, once again up to no good. What's the latest there?
Well, the King County Sheriff, she fired Mike Brown, and Mike Brown is a deputy of the King County. This is the Martin Luther King Jr. County Sheriff's Department, by the way. That's the name of our county. So,
wow.
There should be a high standard here, right, for the way people are treated.
You would think.
Civil rights, human rights, you would think. But Mike Brown decided to make some pretty nasty posts on social media, and this hits home for me, Jeff, because he was accused of making fun of the killing of a Black Lives Matter protester on Interstate 5 by a driver. Now, I take it personally, his comments, because I was there and I witnessed it, and it was one of the most traumatic things I've ever witnessed. So, and then having to deal with the media fallout afterwards, and being interviewed by The Guardian and all sorts of other people when I could barely function. When I see somebody posting all lives splatter with a picture of a car hitting someone, that really just
unreal. How inhumane can you be?
Yeah, well, the police officer claims that he was just talking about the fact that people should be safe and not protest on the freeway. But we have seen a lot of problems with police officers in the Seattle Police Department and in other local and county jurisdictions. Even some problems with Washington State Patrol officers who used to have a very professional reputation. I mean, if nothing else, this is very unprofessional and just very, very insensitive, types of postings. So
he gets fired. Is that okay? And is he going to end up? Which is another problem with the way the police systems in the country work. Does he go, from sheriff to city police, or to another part of Washington State and end up with another job, or is there some kind of stigma that goes with him?
Not that I know of, Jeff.
Yeah.
All I know
this
is
the problem. Reported. I mean, we saw this in the Ferguson case with Michael Brown. We've seen this. These cops move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, carrying, in some cases, not all, racial hatred, some connections to racial groups, Aryan Nation, KKK, etc. And and this has to end. We need to put people in law enforcement that respect the law and respect people and the diversity of this country, in particular in a place like Seattle, which is as open-minded as you can get in the country. Why would you want to be a law enforcement if you don't respect the people that you're supposedly there to serve and protect? I don't get it.
And there is an ongoing series of protests still happening, and there were several protests this week, Jeff, because of another killing of a man by police. So there are people who are pushing back from the more conservative side on some of these issues, but there's inappropriate and unprofessional behavior, and I would say on the part of all doctors, lawyers, police officers, professors, people, executive directors of nonprofits like me. You need to set a professional standard, and you need to be very careful what you do with your personal posts when it comes to your job and how those two intersect and interact. So the fact that, there would be police officers who would be so unprofessional, we also have this issue of the misuse and overuse of chemical weapons and flashbang grenades and rubber bullets and things on protesters here. So that's an ongoing controversy where the city council is trying to ban most of those devices, and people like yours truly have testified before the council on that. So we have a whole series of problems with the police department in this area, including the SPD that goes back to, way before even the World Trade Organization demonstrations in 1999, when they first started using copious amounts of tear gas and pepper spray and rubber bullets and all sorts of projectile weapons, flashbang grenades, concussion grenades on people. I remember hearing concussion grenades from a couple miles away. So, they're meant to stun people. And there have been all sorts of devices that have been used which have been misused. And then there's been, problems with the Department of Justice was called into review, the Seattle Police Department, because of allegations of racial profiling and excessive use of force. So, it's one of the things I've been covering for a long time, and it seems to be a never-ending issue. This whole issue of civil rights and local police and law enforcement agencies and how they deal with protesters. It's just, for some reason, the police in Seattle and Portland were allowed to sort of go rogue some ways, and we have yet to kind of, I think, to secure the kind of accountability that people want. We still lack a sufficient and empowered civilian police review board. So as long as that is true, and that's true in most communities across the country, Jeff, where people have been fighting for civilian oversight of police departments, and in a lot of ways have not been very successful either because of lack of political will on the part of even Democrat city leadership, and then also the police guilds pushing back against these kinds of civil rights reforms during contract negotiations and things like that. So these are all issues we're still dealing with in Seattle, and definitely the Black Lives Matter movement has not gone away, and this issue of racism in the police departments and police use of violence and the killing of people of color has not gone away. It's still a very major issue in Seattle, which is one of the reasons why I predicted we'll probably have some pretty progressive people, even more radical people running for mayor here, because I think Jenny Durkin not, having announced she's not going to run again, that leaves that office wide open for some sort of reform candidate. And so we'll see how that goes. I'm expecting Nikita Oliver, the local poet and educator, to run. There is a Native American woman in Echo Hawk who's running, and so she's been getting some support here locally too. So we'll see what happens, Jeff. It might be time for a different kind of representation in City Hall here. We've got it on the City Council. I'm not sure we have it in the mayor's office yet.
I mean, you got some good people there, and of course, the Democratic Socialist Sawant and a friend of Robert Reich there that you know well too. But there needs to be better leadership. Obviously, we saw what happened with the city police and the resignation of the police chief there several months ago. So there's a lot of work to be done, as there are in a lot of cities, frankly, and it's got to be something. In fact, we talked to our good friend John in Minneapolis about the issue of the leaders of the police unions, and that's another factor on top of that too. And, I'm a huge supporter of unions, but the police unions have really disrupted the concept of labor and confused it with bullying, which is another whole issue altogether. Hey, I want to get into
Foo Fighters.
That's right. I'm so psyched. If we one of these days we're gonna get the okay to start playing more music again, and play some great times like these, which is an appropriate song. I'm of the thought that they should get it, and I would hope that Dave Grohl talks about his time with Nirvana and what that meant, and I think it's always great. I know people in Seattle. Happened in 1994. I was driving down the highway not far from Orlando, Florida, when I heard the awful news of the suicide of Kurt Cobain, and it was devastating. And Dave, of course, and the Foo Fighters rose from that awful tragedy in the mid-'90s and formed a new band, the Foo Fighters, and have become one of the best bands of all time. Your thoughts on them? I know that with the Seattle connection and Dave Grohl's politics and stuff, it must be one of your favorite bands too, right?
Well, it just blows my mind that we're at a point where the Foo Fighters are actually up for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because it seems like it wasn't very long ago when that whole situation first started, when Dave Grohl decided to be not just the drummer, which is something that some of my friends like Dale Lloyd from Lucid and Mark Reynolds have done here, where I've met some really great drummers who decide that they want to be the lead poseur, as Freddie Mercury would say. They want to be the lead singer, and they want to get out front. And sometimes when they do, those guys are really talented.
Phil Collins, look at that.
Instruments and good vocalists. And you got to turn that down. Sorry. There's also, we got music going on here, Jeff, I'm telling you. But
are you practicing there with your bandmates? Are they all in the studio with you? Okay.
It's just funny because you have the buzz coming from the electric guitar amp. You've always got that, and maybe you can hear it. I don't know. But it's that sound. It's that infamous sound that all sound engineers and sound guys are trying to get rid of. And I was trying to tell them, you can't. Okay, it's just a part of rock and roll. You have to find a way of playing loud enough that people can't hear it. And in this really great movie called Birth of the Beatles, I think the BBC did it. I don't even know where it's at, where it's available. I've never seen it on Netflix or Amazon or anything, but it has this one scene where they're in the studio and they're getting this weird sound. Only it was coming from the drums, because sometimes you get sympathetic vibrations, like the snare starts to vibrate when the guitar player plays or something, and their joke was, "Ringo, are you buzzing again?" And then they show him and his eyes are all red, like he just smoked a big joint or something. So I was yelling at the guitar player, like, "Are you buzzing again?" Because you get that sound and you can't get rid of it. But Dave Grohl is amazing. The fact that he can step from behind the drum set in such an established band, the fact that these guys are still out there, the hometown boy from Aberdeen, Hoquiam, Washington, the logging town that made it big, the small town kid that made it big. But, you still have Chris Novoselic, who's the bass player who I think was thinking about running for city council at one point and got really involved in this effort to bring all-ages shows back to Seattle. And then you've got Dave out there, and he is more famous now, I think, than he ever was with Nirvana.
Of course, yeah. Well, that's the ironic thing about it, isn't it?
They deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, and I totally support that. I also totally support Tina Turner. Although if Nina Turner gets inducted, that would be great, too. Maybe she's a great singer, and I don't know.
It would be.
I would love to jam with her sometime. And
that would be a great acceptance speech, I can tell you that.
Yes. I do love her, too. But, yeah, I mean, it's great. It's part of it is just good songwriting, okay? A lot of people talk about the incredible guitar player, like the Eddie Van Halens of the world, or the amazing drummer, the John Bonham and Led Zeppelin or something. But in reality, a lot of it comes down to good songwriting. And if you have good songs, which the Foo Fighters do, and some of them, like the one you often were playing on your program, I mean, that one just sticks in your head. You can't get rid of it. And then the cover that Eddie Vedder did of Won't Back Down by our another Hall of Famer, Tom Petty.
Yeah.
That one I can't get that out of my head either. And those are just good songs, and then performed in a very authentic way by people who really care about the music and who really love what they're doing. So that comes through. And it's also great seeing how some of these bands, and then Mike McCready from Pearl Jam, the guitar player, he's out there giving some creds to some of the most talented people in Seattle who didn't, get that Grammy Award and weren't selling those platinum records, but around here are considered legendary. And I was also talking about someone else who's really influenced me. And he's not from Seattle, but he did a show here at the Mural Amphitheater right there outdoors underneath the Space Needle, my favorite place to play in Seattle. And his name was Charles Bradley. Now, he was a bluesy, funky guy from Brooklyn, but he was very popular here, his music. And there were 18-year-olds, and this guy was like in his 70s, I think, at the time. Incredible showman, incredible performer. Definitely learned a lot of his tricks from James Brown, but just an incredible, authentic person, too. These are the people that end up in the Hall of Fame because they're so authentic and they love the music so much, and they're obviously not out there just to be famous. In fact, I don't think Nirvana ever really wanted to be famous, to tell you the truth, in the beginning.
Look at obviously, it obviously led into very, very, whether you believe he committed suicide or he was murdered and the whole Courtney Love thing or whatever. But the fact is that the pressure on him, in that late 80s, early 90s time period. Hey, I want to talk to our other friend and your namesake, Mark, who's a big music supporter and so forth. Mark, I heard the term blues. I thought of you as well. I know you're love the jazz and the blues.
Oh yeah, Mark. One time I went to Fillmore West and I got to see the Small Faces, and I don't know if you're a big fan of them, but they had Rod Stewart and Ron Wood, and they were incredible. I mean, I saw Led Zeppelin, but I'd have to say the Faces are up there with them. That band was great. Are you familiar with them in that time?
MTC?
That's before my time, but I have seen. Okay, so there was this show back in those days, and you can see some repeats of it on YouTube called The Midnight Special or something.
Yes, yeah. A lot of them took place at Fillmore West, right?
Maybe that's it, but I do remember seeing the Small Faces and Rod Stewart performing, and they dumped so much confetti on the band that they were literally wandering around on the stage up to their knees in confetti. It was really crazy. But I do remember it was a great show, and I am familiar with the Small Faces, but and also, of course, Rod Stewart's solo career, and talk about great songwriting. He has some really good songs. Every Picture Tells a Story, Maggie May, stuff like that. Classic.
Oh yeah, Maggie.
Just good songwriting.
Ron Wood was a great guitar player, and he could play the slide. One of the better slide guitar players I've seen too.
You know, I was also going to mention something because I know we're getting short on time. I was going to tell you guys a quick story about a guy here who actually created the Museum for Pop Culture, better known as the Experience Music Project when it first started, and that's Paul Allen. You know, it was the place for him to put all of his Jimi Hendrix paraphernalia. Huge music fan, huge Jimi Hendrix fan, had bought some of Jimmy's old guitars and other paraphernalia. So he created this museum and this big media interactive museum cultural center called Mopop here in Seattle, designed by Frank Gehry, so it's all weird architecturally, and that's where the monorail goes to from downtown. So he was known for supporting, music in this city, and he also had his own band at one time and, liked to play electric guitar. And then, and I had met him when the Seahawks were celebrating their Super Bowl victory, basically in the jam of the crowd and the traffic at Safeco Field. And so I got a chance to stop and talk to him about my song called Legion of Boom, which is one of my most popular songs, and it's about the Seahawks. But anyway, I wanted him to know about my song because I knew he liked music. But he was a Microsoft millionaire. He and Bill Gates started the whole thing, and has been sort of a big philanthropist, and he also bought the Seahawks, right? But he's always loved music. He always loved music. So I was talking to a friend. He said, I'm taking the boat out to Lake Washington, and I'll be back. And then later he told me what he got hired to drive this boat. He shows up, and there's Paul Allen with Peter Gabriel hanging out at Lake Washington, and they want to go for a boat ride. So they get in the boat, and they tell him to drive as fast as possible. So that's my story about Paul Allen and Peter Gabriel.
That's a good way to end the segment. We need, obviously, more people that are actually billionaires and multimillionaires to give back to the community. So great to talk to you, MTC. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the snow, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week. And Mark, you enjoy the weekend, my friend. We'll talk to you then.
Check out my music at YouTube. I'm on YouTube and SoundCloud, and I'm going to go play in the snow. Have a good weekend, Jeff. See you later.
Hey, have a great one, man. Hey, I want to thank Ron Kreider for producing this broadcast, folks. Have yourself a great weekend. Keep on fighting peacefully. Enjoy it. We'll be back on Monday. Right now, it is my time to say I gotta go.
This is the Jeff Santos Show.
33 minutes past the hour. It's the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into. We're here every Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 Eastern Time, 12 to 3 Pacific. You can go to Revolution Radio Network at 6:30 Eastern. All of the podcast of all the great interviews we do with our great list of contributors are there for you to listen to. Of course, if you are in Wisconsin, you can tune in from 7 to 10 p.m. Central Time on 92.7 FM, and you can listen to the replay of the show as well there exclusively in Madison, Wisconsin, there on 92.7 FM. One of our great contributors over the years is our next guest. He's a great producer, director, and an author of many books, including The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. He has got a great new story out called Smoking Gun for Impeachment, Proof Trump's Call to March on Capitol Was a Crime. We're talking about the individual who has looked at the issues for a good 20 years in America, if not longer, on the criminal front, by a lot of Republicans and a handful of Democrats that have cheated their way to elections, and we don't go back to the 2001 in Florida. Our good friend Greg Palast, live from Los Angeles, joins us on the line. Greg, how are you, sir?
Okay, happy Valentine.
Happy Valentine's weekend to you, my friend, and and to your lovely significant other. Well, we got lots. This has been an interesting week to watch video. I think the Democratic managers have done a very good job. I will say I would probably like to hear from the police a little bit more because, after what we went through this past summer and you were in the middle of it there in Los Angeles with police reform, I'd like to see how police, have dealt with this issue and can talk about it firsthand, because I think this would make the Republicans' hypocritical viewpoints here come out altogether. But talk to us about what you have found, working with a lot of good folks on the progressive side of things.
Well, if you go to gregpalast.com, you can read my report on the smoking gun of impeachment. And this goes back to report I did first for Consortium News, but then developed. The impeachment managers picked up the story I wrote in Consortium News that I broke, which was that there was no permit to march from the ellipse, from the rally to the Capitol. Now you might say, well, big deal, it's just a piece of paper. No, it ain't. And this is crucial because at the moment, there's kind of a gap in the evidence. We got Donald Trump saying, we got to save the nation and blah, 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 and then you have a riot in the Capitol. Well, how do you connect those two things? Saying incendiary words, you got to fight for the correct vote, etc. It's not much different than Stacey Abrams, is it? You can impeach Stacey Abrams too with that, saying she questioned the election.
Right.
So you can't just go from questioning the election to convicting someone of fomenting a riot. You need a connection, and the connection is literally physical from that rally. When he said, we are going to march to the Capitol.
Of course, we're talking to a Los Angelino today here on the Jeff Santos Show. We'll be talking to two people who Greg knows well. Our good friend Alan Minsky will join Harvey K in hour number 2. And, of course, Joe Sandberg will join us in his usual spot at 5 p.m., 2 p.m. Pacific time.